1. Cyrus and Ginny's silver-gray memories flowed in the dark like pale moonlight scattered through morning mist, throwing a faint, steady glow. Cyrus watched the unchanging scene in silence. He had no sense of how long he'd been here, and his pulse refused to quiet because he had transmigrated into a soul. Not even a whole one, a fragment, carrying only a handful of memories. The fragment belonged to the notorious Dark Lord, Lord Voldemort. More precisely, it was a remnant of a Horcrux he had made as a schoolboy, the 16-year-old Tom Riddle. Now, because of Cyrus's arrival, little Tom's separate consciousness no longer existed. The remnant had become whole. In the world of transmigration that Cyrus knew, becoming a Horcrux was a particularly dramatic start. He'd read plenty of novels where protagonists were humiliated or died early, but it was rare to transmigrate and immediately have to find a way to be useful. What made it worse was being trapped in a diary, forced to wait for the plot to move forward. Had he not been able to recall all the magic Tom Riddle had learned at school, Cyrus suspected he would have gone mad long ago from boredom. As he sifted through the memories, Cyrus couldn't help admiring Tom Riddle's mind. The boy had been a genius, worthy of the name Voldemort. By his 5th year, he had mastered almost everything taught at Hogwarts and had already begun to study dark arts from the restricted section. At that age, most students were still caught up in adolescent restlessness. Those who left marks on history often started young. Dumbledore and Grindelwald dreamed of changing the world while still students, and later acted on it. Grindelwald nearly overturned the wizarding world. Voldemort's ambition was, perhaps, narrower, but his talent was no less real. Cyrus had spent countless days digesting Tom Riddle's knowledge, and today should have been like any other. But then the silver mist shivered, and black ink characters drifted down like a wisp of smoke, settling into the silent memories and slowly unfurling. August 19th, sunny. The line cut off. Cyrus jolted. Across the waking world at an old wooden desk, Ginny Weasley had just dipped her quill and begun to write. She blinked in surprise. The words she had just put on the page had vanished. The yellow diary showed only the printed title on the cover, and faintly on the back of the cover, the name Riddle. Ginny had never heard the name. Most of her textbooks were used copies. It seemed likely that Riddle had been the book's first owner. No one had told her it was magical. Curiosity, fierce and bright, surged in the heart of the natural Gryffindor. That summer had already been extraordinary. Harry Potter had stayed at the Burrow, she'd received her letter from Hogwarts, and now the second-hand book she'd expected to hate might be a real magic diary. She picked up her quill again. Today is a special day. The ink disappeared as if the page were a sponge, leaving not a mark. Ginny flipped the paper over. The back was clean. Where had the ink gone? Her eyes widened. Then slowly, a line of writing formed across the blank page, more like a greeting than a sentence. "Hello, did anything good happen to you today?" Ginny yelped, dropped the quill, and scrambled back, staring at the diary with a mixture of fear and awe. Any child raised in a magic family knew the warning. Never trust anything that can think for itself, unless you can see where it keeps its brain. That was the magical equivalent of a muggle parent telling a child not to take sweets from strangers. A thinking object could very well be dangerous. She almost ran to tell her mother. But another thought held her back. Molly Weasley had chosen the book from Flourish and Blot's second-hand shelf herself. If it were truly dangerous, would Molly have given it to her? Maybe she could keep it and see what tricks it had. If anything went wrong, she could tell Mum then. Ginny drew breath, picked the quill up, and edged back to the desk. The greeting waited on the page, as if expecting an answer. "Who are you?" she wrote. Those 3 words joined the greeting and vanished. New writing appeared in their place. "My name is Tom Riddle, a small piece of memory left by the owner of this diary. Where did you get it?" Ginny hesitated, then mouthed the next words aloud before she set quill to page again. "Harry Potter," she whispered, just to hear herself speak and to make sure this wasn't some silly, nonsensical game. It calmed her enough to write, "My mum bought it in the second-hand section of Flourish and Blot's." "The second-hand section of Flourish and Blot's? So you are a Hogwarts student?" The diary's tone seemed pleased, as if meeting someone unexpectedly close to itself. The little word also made Ginny feel a peculiar kinship. I'm just starting my first year this year. Are you a Hogwarts student too? I used to be, the diary answered. I graduated. I never thought the diary I left behind would end up with a young wizard at Hogwarts. Perhaps it is fate. May I ask your name? Ginny hesitated a moment before writing, then signed the page. Ginevra Molly Weasley. You can call me Ginny. A line of writing appeared in the diary again, but before she could read it, a sharp knock sounded on the door, and she snapped the book shut. Ginny, dinner. Are you asleep? I called you ages ago. Molly's voice floated through. No, Mum. I'm coming, Ginny called back, tucking the diary into the desk as if it might overhear. New book starting. Internal submission approved. Feel free to invest. Please give some collections and consistent reads. This is really important to me. The little author. Oh. 2. Cyrus's resurrection plan. Cyrus could neither see nor hear the outside world, but he felt the diary being slammed shut. The motion made him twitch with unease. Was Ginny discovered? He didn't know when the original Tom Riddle had begun communicating with Ginny Weasley. All he was certain of was that if a single word was written in the diary, Tom Riddle would seize the chance to speak. So as long as the original Tom Riddle remained undiscovered, he shouldn't be exposed either. Why the book had been closed just then could have many explanations. For now, Cyrus could only wait. Since the moment he had transmigrated into that leather-bound journal, he had been prepared for this opportunity. For his resurrection, patience was a small price to pay. Originally, he'd had 2 plans, dictated by who opened the diary. If Lucius Malfoy had found it, Cyrus would have tried to direct him to a few dark wizards whose life force could be used to bring him back. But that was unlikely now. When Voldemort had given the diary to Malfoy, he'd probably only mentioned that it could open the Chamber of Secrets, not the Horcrux within. So Cyrus would have to follow the path Tom Riddle had laid out, leech the vitality of young wizards, use that stolen life to warp reality, and gradually reform a physical self. He was not Tom Riddle. He could skip the melodrama of dueling Harry Potter in a damp chamber. If needed, he could slip away before the governors called Dumbledore back to Hogwarts. It was still a workable plan. Most importantly, no one would have to die for it, well, except for the roosters Ginny had strangled. Filch's cat, Madame Norris, would be none the worse for wear. Cyrus felt a pang of odd regret and muttered inwardly, Sorry, Kun-Kun. There were risks, Dumbledore being the largest, but Cyrus had few alternatives. He had no legs. If Ginny didn't carry him into Hogwarts, he had nowhere else to go. And how easy would it be to fool grown wizards outside the school compared to the naive students walking its halls? Once he had a body, with the basilisk at his command, escaping Hogwarts wouldn't be impossible. Once out, his safety would improve dramatically. Even if Dumbledore suspected him, the headmaster would have little chance of tracing a thing that hid inside a simple schoolgirl's journal. The idea of confessing to Dumbledore was laughable. The headmaster would never trust a face that matched Tom Riddle's. He would assume it was another trick, especially after last year's attempt to steal the Philosopher's Stone. No, secrecy was the only path. After dinner at the Burrow, Ginny hurried down the stairs. Seeing Harry laughing with Ron at the dining table, she flushed and lowered her eyes, sitting primly in her chair. The Weasleys were accustomed to this. Ever since Fred and George had driven their enchanted Ford Anglia to fetch Harry, Ginny had been quieter than normal. Harry barely knew Ginny. He thought of her as Ron's little, reserved sister and offered a polite greeting before returning his attention to his plate. At the Burrow, meals were plentiful and tasty, far better than at the Dursleys, and Harry ate his fill, worrying humorously that he might gain so much weight he'd no longer be fit for Seeker. After the others drifted away, Ginny slipped to her room, locked the door, and once she was confident she was alone, set her hand on the diary. Up close, the book looked older than she'd first thought. The black cover had faded to a smooth dullness, but it was otherwise undamaged. A date and a publisher's name were stamped faintly on the inside cover. 50 years old, an age that felt heavy with history. Had Mr. Tom Riddle been dead for decades? The thought pricked at her. She leafed through the pages. The lines she hadn't read earlier had vanished. She waited. Nothing appeared. Maybe whoever, or whatever, was inside hadn't noticed the commotion outside. That idea eased her a little. At least for the moment, the diary seemed harmless. She dipped her quill, poised, and began to write. Inside the book, Cyrus hovered, every imaginary nerve taut with anticipation. He could do nothing but wait. His impatience felt like a tiny animal clawing at his chest. The distant joys of arcane theory, intricate potions, and elegant transfiguration now barely touched him. He was a father waiting in a delivery room corridor for news of his child. The child, finally, was making its first sounds. "Hello, Mr. Riddle. Are you still there? My mom came over just now, and I don't know if I should tell her about you." Cyrus's heart steadied. This was the moment of truth. Would he coax Ginny's trust, or would his deception be exposed and the diary be consigned to a fire? Saying no outright might seem evasive. Being too eager to reveal secrets could arouse suspicion. He let a practiced calm edge his reply. "Of course you can. In fact, you should. Any witch or wizard should be cautious about unknown magical objects, unless you can be certain they're safe. I admit I'd hoped you'd checked. It's a relief you did. If this had been 14 sonnets of a sorcerer instead of a diary, you might be in worse trouble." Ginny's hand trembled with a giggle as she wrote back. She remembered how she'd even said Harry Potter aloud to make sure she wasn't under a spell. That such a thing had come from her and had not immediately destroyed her made the diary seem less like a sinister artifact. It felt almost companionable. "You sound just like Percy," she wrote. "Really?" the diary replied. "He hasn't become head boy yet, though, has he? I always thought someone with 12 obuels would be very proud of them." Ginny paused, then smiled as she wrote, "Who is Percy?" "He's my brother. He was a Gryffindor prefect last year, and he got 12 obuels. He's a bit boring," she added, as if that needed explaining. By now, she was almost convinced the diary was harmless. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at her all evening. "I don't think I need to tell Mum about you, do you?" Cyrus swallowed a surge of triumph and kept his tone gentle. "Just this once," he wrote. "Sometimes keeping a small secret to yourself makes life more interesting." Ginny smiled at the answer and put her quill down, feeling, for the first time in days, less alone. Cyrus, trapped in ink and paper, listened to the little flicker of hope in that smile and stoked his plans quietly, patient as ever. 3. Impure blood. Summer vacation passed quickly. In those 10-some days, Cyrus had practically earned Ginny's trust. The two of them were now as close as old friends who had known one another for years. It hadn't been difficult. Although Ginny was the most cherished child in her family, as a girl she had secrets she couldn't bring herself to share with them. Cyrus was convenient company for that. Sometimes he felt guilty deceiving a young girl, but for the sake of his own resurrection, he couldn't afford many scruples. Besides, Ginny wouldn't die in the end, and everyone petrified by the basilisk would eventually be saved. Everyone at the burrow noticed Ginny acting oddly. She hadn't been screaming or shouting since August, and had been going to her room early every night. They assumed it had something to do with Harry. Fred and George exchanged knowing looks and snickered. "Mr. Riddle, Hogwarts starts tomorrow," Ginny said, and Cyrus could feel the eagerness in her voice. For any young witch or wizard, going to school was thrilling proof that they weren't a squib. He felt even more excited than she did. The path to resurrection was almost within reach. If everything went smoothly, he might have a body by the end of the next term. "Congratulations, Ginny," he replied, sounding as enthusiastic as he could. "Hogwarts will be wonderful, I'm sure." "Thank you," a hesitant thank you, and Cyrus sensed there was more. "To be honest, I'm a bit worried about the sorting," she admitted. "Fred and George refused to tell me what the sorting ceremony is like. Last year I overheard them and Ron talking, and they said I might face a troll." Her voice was anxious. "I know they fought a troll last year. I'm worried about being bullied at school too," she added. Cyrus couldn't help smiling. Keeping the sorting ceremony secret from first years was an annual Hogwarts tradition, and it bred all kinds of ridiculous rumors. He regretted missing last year's ceremony. He couldn't very well go on about pure bloods anymore. After all, he was now Lord Voldemort, a half-blood. Still, he put on a reassuring tone. "That's nonsense, Ginny. Hogwarts doesn't make first years fight trolls. The secret of sorting is just tradition. In practice, the sorting ceremony isn't dangerous. You don't need to worry. And as for being bullied, have you forgotten the jinxes I taught you? If anyone dares to speak ill of you, Pick up your wand and hit them with one. Let them know you won't be trifled with. Okay, I'll fight back. But what does not too dangerous mean? Ginny asked. Cyrus teased her. It means they won't let first years die. Parents wouldn't stand for it, would they? Thanks for comforting me. Ginny slammed her diary shut in mock anger. She hadn't expected Tom Riddle to be so coy about the sorting. That only made her more worried. Darn you, Tom. I don't want to talk to you ever again. She tossed the diary onto her bed and sat pouting, but she couldn't stay away. After a moment, she opened it again. Are you sure we don't have to fight trolls? Of course I'm sure. And even if, by some impossible chance, you did, don't worry, you can handle it. Remember the spells I taught you. If you want, I can tell you how to deal with trolls. They're not very bright. Use the levitation charm to lift a heavy object and smash it into the back of their heads to knock them out, Cyrus said, sounding a little like the reluctant tutor he had become to make up for misleading her. He had taught her nearly all the charms from the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. Ginny might even be better at some of them than Ron. Ginny relaxed. I'll trust you this once. Good night, Mr. Riddle. Good night, Ginny. Have a smooth first day. Just as Cyrus had wished, Ginny's first day went smoothly. Harry and Ron's did not. They had missed the Hogwarts Express, and no one noticed until Hermione came looking. Hello, Ginny. Have you seen Harry and Ron? I can't find them on the train, Hermione asked, relief in her face when Ginny didn't know. Fred and George said they were following you. I didn't, Ginny said. Mum and Dad took me onto the platform first. Luna Lovegood, pale-haired and dreamy-eyed, sat beside her. Ginny found Luna odd but harmless. They should be on the train. Didn't we come together? I can't find them anywhere. Hermione flopped down opposite Ginny, clearly worried. When troublemakers went quiet like this, mischief was usually afoot. I just hope they don't lose any more points for Gryffindor. An ethereal voice chimed in from beside them, soft as if a ghost were speaking. I'm not sure. Luna's eyes were wide. What? I'm not sure if flying in the sky in a box will result in points being deducted, but I think it's cool. I want to try it too. She peered out the window. What? Hermione and Ginny cried in unison and turned to look out. Ron and Harry were outside, happily waving from Mr. Weasley's enchanted Ford Anglia, which streaked past like two reckless generals. They can't be serious, Hermione said, incredulous and half furious. They're going to lose so many points for Gryffindor. They could even be expelled. Expelled? Ginny went pale. She'd been looking forward to 6 years at Hogwarts with Harry. If that were ruined, everything would be over. Don't worry, I didn't say for sure. Hermione hurried to reassure her. She sounded less convinced than she liked to be. We did crazier things last year and got away with them. As long as Muggles don't see them, it might not be so bad. But this sort of thing, she trailed off as the car banked and vanished into the clouds. Forget it. I'm going to look for Neville, Hermione decided, standing up and leaving Ginny and Luna together. Have a good time, Ginny, she added, and was gone. Thank you. New book launched. Internal review passed. Please support it. Follow along. It's very important to me, the humble author. Please, everyone, don't just leave the book sitting in your library. Sometimes books really do die if you do. Boo-hoo-hoo. Chapter 4, A Night Out on the First Day of School. Tom, you lied to me. Ginny sat fuming at her desk, her quill stabbing the paper. She was really angry. Normally she would have addressed Cyrus as Mr. Riddle, but tonight she couldn't be bothered with formalities. Careful, don't break me. When did I lie to you? Cyrus replied immediately. You said the sorting ceremony would be dangerous. And what happened? It was just a scruffy hat. Was it going to bite my head off? Ginny snapped. What made her angrier was that before the sorting, she'd confidently told the other girls she had first-hand information, and now she'd lost face. You made me lose face, she added, stabbing another line into the page. She stopped poking the book then, checked carefully, and was relieved to find she hadn't left any dents on the diary. Destruction by ordinary force was almost impossible. Horcruxes were not easily harmed. I never said the sorting ceremony would be dangerous. I said not to worry, that it wouldn't be too dangerous. And look, you're perfectly fine. What a joyous occasion, Cyrus said mischievously. He had spent a long time alone. His small human interactions with Ginny brightened him. He was not Lord Voldemort, not here. Yes, but you made it sound like I might lose an arm or a leg, Ginny retorted. One of us must have a different idea of not too dangerous, Cyrus countered. Thanks. That means completely not dangerous. Do you expect that hat to suffocate me when it's on my head? She snapped. Not exactly. If you are wicked at heart, it will sort you into Azkaban. That's where the danger comes from, Cyrus said, bluffing. Ginny's eyes widened. Are you serious? Of course. Didn't it speak to you in your mind? The sorting hat can see into people's hearts. Those of ill intent should be sent to Azkaban. It's really Hogwarts' fifth house. Its animal is the Dementor. I've never heard any of this, Ginny said. There are more secrets in this castle than anyone can know. Even Dumbledore can't possibly know them all. Exploring Hogwarts is very interesting. Gryffindor has a tradition of night wandering, Cyrus tempted. That's against the rules. Percy and Hermione would not be happy. Is that so? I think your two older brothers might be more encouraging. Ginny had already told him things about the Weasleys. Cyrus could say this without reserve. They do seem to thrive on chaos, she muttered. Enough of that. Anything interesting happen on your first day? Make any friends? Cyrus asked, suddenly attentive. Of course it was interesting. Ginny wrote heavily, sarcasm clear. Harry and Ron were late. They flew Dad's car all the way from the Muggle world. Several Muggles saw it, and then they crashed into a humping willow. People thought they'd be expelled. Luckily, they weren't. That really was exciting, Cyrus said. I think it was terrible. What if Harry had been expelled? Ron started it. Dad would be in so much trouble, Ginny said, frowning. You care a lot about Harry Potter, Cyrus observed sharply. Ginny's face flushed, as if he'd read her secret. No, he seems quiet, not reckless. She covered her burning cheeks and scribbled the sentence with one hand. She was grateful Mr. Riddle couldn't see her expression. So you don't care about him? Of course not, she denied too quickly, then hesitated and wrote, At most a little admiration. He defeated you-know-who. I grew up listening to stories about him. Remarkable, Cyrus said. You needn't worry. Harry Potter defeated you-know-who. He helped save the wizarding world. If Dumbledore expelled him, Hogwarts would be flooded with howlers the next day. You're right. Ginny's mood lightened. Her cheeks were still warm. I need to sleep, Mr. Riddle. I have classes tomorrow, she wrote. Sleep? No, you should go night wandering, Cyrus immediately urged. But don't you want to see the castle at night? There's no difference from daytime. Of course there is. If you always follow the rules, you'll never see Hogwarts under the silver moonlight. And playing hide-and-seek with the caretaker can be great fun. Aren't you tempted at all? I am certainly not. Later, though, Ginny found herself restless. Which way should I go? She wrote as she slipped out of bed. Curiosity had won out. She moved with small, furtive steps, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. The problem was she still didn't understand the castle's layout. Finding the right corridor in the dark was daunting. Why not go to the fourth-floor corridor? Didn't your brother say he and Harry faced you-know-who there last year? Cyrus suggested. Ginny's eyes lit up. Paying homage to the place where Harry once fought. What a good idea. Where is the fourth-floor corridor? She asked the diary. A map appeared on the page, drawn slowly. It was one Cyrus had sketched from memories tied to Lord Riddle. There were few secret passages. He hadn't cared for such things. Ginny glanced at it, then closed the diary quickly. Teachers sometimes patrolled at night. She didn't want anyone to catch her talking to a book. The fourth-floor corridor. This way, she whispered to herself, and set off, excited to see where Harry had confronted you-know-who. She didn't notice the shadow that moved into the corridor behind her. 5. Corridor and trophy room on the fourth floor. Ginny tiptoed through the dark castle. It was nearly midnight, and the corridors were unlit. The wind moaned outside, and the tall trees scraped their branches against the windows like twisted, bird-shaped monsters. All of it made Ginny a little jumpy. She was on edge, startled at every rustle, and every small sound made her flinch. She suddenly regretted putting the diary away. What if a three-headed dog that ate people without blinking lurked around the next corner? Ron had said a friend of his had kept a Cerberus as big as a house in the castle last year. But even if it were true, Mr. Riddle couldn't help her now. Mr. Riddle, she whispered to the leather-bound book in her arms. She clutched the diary tightly, as if it were a living companion, trying to draw courage from it. Perhaps it really did have magic. Gradually, Ginny calmed down. The enormous castle that had seemed terrifying at first now looked simply vast, ancient, and magnificent. It was far more interesting than her cramped little home. She felt the thrill of walking the halls at night, doing as she pleased, ignoring school rules, running as much as she liked, even casting a few harmless sparks with her wand. At worst, a portrait would scold her, or a passing ghost would grumble. It's not good for a young girl to be wandering the castle alone at night. Ah, Gryffindor, obviously. Let me see, Ginny Weasley, right? The Weasley's hair is impossible to miss. You're already sneaking about on your first night at school, better than your two brothers. Nearly headless Nick drifted through the wall, cheerful as ever. Hello, nearly headless Nick. Ginny knew him well. Every year he performed his head separation routine at the Gryffindor table, though a strip of flesh still connected his head to his neck. How rude, you won't even call me sir. He pretended to be offended, though he genuinely disliked the axe that had nearly severed him in the past. Okay, Sir Nicholas, Ginny corrected herself at once. Good child, have a pleasant stroll, and don't go up to the 5th floor. Peeves is there. Don't use your wand either. Be careful not to attract Filch. Sir Nicholas gave her a pair of cheery warnings and slid back through the wall, his head dangling. Ginny put her wand away and continued down the dark corridor. A few minutes later, she reached a wooden door at the end of the 4th floor landing. This is it. Locked? That won't stop me. Alohomora. She drew her wand and the lock clicked open, the latch falling with a clatter. She grinned. It's a good thing Mr. Riddle taught me all the first-year spells. She pushed the door open. The room was pitch black. Lumos. The tip of her wand flared to life, revealing a small, plain chamber. Disappointed, Ginny set the diary on the floor and peered around. There was no three-headed beast, no trapdoor leading to secret tunnels. She wrote quickly in the diary, scrawling the words crookedly. Cyrus, Mr. Riddle's voice, answered, suggesting perhaps Dumbledore had put things back in order, but there were still plenty of oddities in the castle. Secret passages, hidden chambers, and even a painting below the Great Hall that contained a pear you could tickle until it turned into a doorknob. Never mind, I'm not hungry, Ginny murmured. She had eaten enough at the feast, and not finding anything about Harry made her a little let down. Then she remembered something. Mr. Riddle, you said you received a special services to the school award. Can I go see it? Of course, Cyrus replied. The trophy room is on the 4th floor, just a few turns from here. Ginny closed the diary, extinguished her wand, and slipped out. Almost immediately, a darker shadow appeared in the corridor. Argus Filch, rusty lamp swinging, his voice hoarse and unpleasant. Hurry, Madam Norris. Catch those brats breaking school rules. I heard something. His lamplight bobbed as he shuffled along. He stooped to pick up a fallen chain from the floor, his face lighting with triumph. How he longed to catch students, tie them up with that chain, and make an example of them. Quick, it must be the Weasley twins. Don't let them get away, he muttered, and Madame Norris, nose-twitching, sniffed at the trail and began to follow the footsteps Ginny had left. The trophy room was larger on the inside than it looked from the corridor, clearly enchanted with an undetectable extension charm. Shelves and glass cases stretched away into dimness, filled with Quidditch cups, plaques, and awards from years of competitions. Names of prefects and head students were engraved on long boards behind a large pane of glass. By the faint light from the corridor, Ginny spotted Percy's name, and not far from it, Tom Riddle's. His name appeared again and again throughout the displays. She could imagine how outstanding he had been. The special services to the school award stood apart from the rest. A large, prominent plaque with no explanation of why it had been given. Curiosity prickled at her. Ginny opened the diary, an act that had become instinct, and was about to write when something moved in the shadow. A hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. Ginny's eyes widened in terror. 6. Secrets and Patronus charms. Fred, George? Ginny screamed, panic written across her face, but Fred was quick. He clapped a hand over her mouth. Quiet, Ginny. Filch is not far away, George hissed. What are you doing here? Ginny whispered, flustered. Her heart hammered so hard it felt as if it might burst from her chest. When had they slipped up beside her? Had they seen her talking to the diary? Those questions rattled through her head like a drum roll. She felt like a condemned prisoner waiting for executioners to swing the axe and separate her from the diary. But neither twin mentioned it. "Sorry we scared you." Fred let go slowly, smiling. "I'll explain later. Now come with us." They pulled Ginny out of the trophy room without further explanation and hurried off. As they walked, a sharp voice grew closer. "That's Filch, the caretaker. Probably the most annoying person at Hogwarts," Fred whispered into her ear. "And Snape. If he catches us, it'll be bad. Professor McGonagall might dock points, which isn't the worst thing, but if he gives us detention and makes us write apologies, boring." George sounded amused. "Thankfully, he hasn't caught us since first year, right, Fred?" "Exactly." Fred led them to a stone witch statue. Ginny could hear Filch nearby now, maybe just around the corner. She felt a spike of fear. What if they discovered her conversations with Mr. Riddle in the diary? "What should we do?" she asked, less panicked now that the twins were with her. "Of course, we've got a secret weapon." Fred triumphantly produced his wand and tapped the one-eyed witch's head twice. "Finite incantatem." The statue split down the middle, revealing a dark, cavernous passage. "Get in, quickly." They slipped inside and the stone closed behind them. "Lumos," someone whispered. "Let's wait here," said Fred. Neither twin suggested going deeper. "Where does this passage lead?" "Nowhere. It's blocked up ahead," Fred lied smoothly. He was pleased Ginny wasn't as dull as Percy or as blunt as Ron. Telling her about a secret passage out of school in her first year didn't seem wise. Fortunately, Ginny was preoccupied and suspicious never crossed her mind. "How did you find me?" she finally asked. "To be honest, we saw you as soon as you left the tower," George said. "You were following me?" Ginny's eyes widened. If they'd been following her, they'd have seen her talking to Riddle. "Of course not. We're not that boring," Fred said quickly. "We were heading toward the Forbidden Forest and only got halfway when we found you about to be caught by Filch, so we came to save you, right, George?" "Exactly," George nodded. "But how did you know I was here with Filch?" "That's our secret." They exchanged a conspiratorial glance and laughed. "We're not sharing that one. Not even with you, Ginny." "Secret." Ginny looked them over, trying to pry it out of them, but the twins wouldn't budge. "Fine, I'm used to it. Besides, who doesn't have secrets?" She hugged the diary tighter without meaning to. The twins didn't notice and went on teasing her. "Come on, Ginny, everyone's past knows you like Harry," Fred joked. "Except for little Ronnie," George added. "He's still a kid." They laughed. Ginny's face flushed immediately. Oddly, she wasn't angry. She felt a small, fierce pride. "You probably will never know my true secret," she thought. When Ginny's attention slipped, Fred fished out the Marauder's map, scanned it quickly, and folded it away. "All right, let's go. Filch is on the 6th floor now. Peeves is with him, probably making his life miserable," he said with a grin. "What? How do you know?" "I told you. It's a secret. Secrets get kept." George opened the statue door. There was nobody in the corridor. "Oh, and this passage is a secret too, so don't tell anyone. I don't want this becoming the Gryffindor common room." "You won't tell me your secrets, but you expect me to keep mine?" Ginny protested. "Don't forget why we're here. We saved you. Otherwise, you'd be done for. You'd be expelled." "All right, I won't be ungrateful," Ginny sighed. The three of them returned to the tower together. The fat lady wasn't surprised to see them. "Password, child," she said. "Honeydew," Ginny replied. Back in the girls' dormitory, Ginny climbed into bed as quietly as she could, careful not to wake her roommates. She had meant to write to Mr. Riddle about the Special Contribution Award and the night's events, but sleep rolled over her like a tide before she could pick up her pen. She managed one hurried line. "Good night," then she fell asleep. "Good night. I wish you sweet dreams, Ginny." After Cyrus replied, he went back to his research on spells. Though Lord Voldemort had been prodigiously talented in his youth, his knowledge and experience had gaps. One such gap was the Patronus charm. To cast it successfully, a witch or wizard must focus on their happiest memory. Voldemort, who had never understood love, could never truly grasp happiness. That may have made the spell irrelevant for him in practical terms, but Cyrus still hoped to learn it. The Patronus charm is invaluable for resisting the dark arts and warding off certain dark creatures. Driving away Dementors is only one of its uses. Please give recommendations and favorites, my darlings. Shower me with your votes. Chapter 7. After School Tutoring. The incantation for the Patronus charm wasn't difficult, and Cyrus understood the theory perfectly. He had all the textbooks memorized. Tom Riddle had tried to master the spell once and failed. Cyrus, though, had the advantage of understanding each principle. The only uncertainty was whether he could produce the spell without ever having held a wand. He didn't try that evening. Instead, he received a message from Ginny. "Good evening, Mr. Riddle. I almost overslept this morning. Luckily, my roommate woke me up." Cyrus detected a touch of complaint in her tone and answered immediately. "Almost? So you did wake up. That means last night was worth it. Even if you'd been late, I bet it was interesting. I can teach you most of the theory, maybe better than the professors, since one-on-one is more patient." "But I'd lose points, and I don't want to become a Gryffindor sinner," Ginny replied, adding a blush in the text. Then, as if remembering something, she wrote eagerly, "Mr. Riddle, do you want to know what happened after I went to the trophy room?" She paused there, building suspense, waiting for his reaction. "I'm all ears," Cyrus replied. Ginny wasn't satisfied and pouted a little before continuing. "I almost got caught by the caretaker, but Fred and George helped hide me. They have a trick. Even without seeing, they can tell where someone is. And they know secret passages. There's one at the one-eyed witch statue on the 4th floor corridor. They told me to keep it a secret, but I think it's okay to tell you. Oh, Mr. Riddle, your Marauder's map doesn't have this one." The Marauder's map. Cyrus smiled inwardly. He knew exactly the twins' secret. The map, made by the 4 Marauders, could pinpoint people anywhere in the castle. As magical items went, it was brilliant. Cyrus had an interest in the map, but it wasn't crucial to his plans. He also knew the map had limits. Some places, like the Room of Requirement or the Chamber of Secrets, didn't show up. He already knew of 3 secret exits from Hogwarts, through the Humping Willow, at the one-eyed witch statue, and behind the mirror on the 5th floor. That was more than enough for now. "That's not surprising," he replied. "Hogwarts has more secrets than anyone can imagine. I doubt the Weasleys know the kind of secrets I do." "Like what?" Ginny teased. "Like secret rooms." Cyrus felt Ginny lean in with curiosity. "Secret rooms exactly," he said slowly, careful not to reveal too much. He wasn't interested in telling her about the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, at least not yet. Besides that, there were many other overlooked rooms in the castle. Tom Riddle had come across several while searching for the chamber. Most were empty or filled with old junk. Hogwarts is a 1,000-year-old magical building. There are countless hidden rooms. Most are empty, but sometimes they make good temporary hideaways. He rattled off a few more plausible locations, and Ginny was astonished. "Why didn't you say anything before?" she asked. "I thought it would be more fun for you to discover them on your own," Cyrus answered. Ginny nodded and then started writing down what had happened in class that day. Since she had prepared in advance, she'd done well and earned several points for Gryffindor, almost like a mini Hermione. Ginny lacked Hermione's sharpness, but she made friends easily rather than rubbing people the wrong way. "Oh, and this morning Ron got a howler. Mum sent it," she complained. "Dad got into trouble too because of their antics. Ron always causes trouble. Fred and George were right. He's like a child who never grows up." She couldn't complain about it in person, so she unloaded to Cyrus. "Honestly, I'm a bit embarrassed. In class, everyone keeps asking, 'Was that your brother who got the howler this morning?'" She sounded genuinely mortified on Ron's behalf. Cyrus knew Ron cared for Ginny. He'd worry after her even when he was injured, as he had been after the Humping Willow incident, and had wanted to see her soaring despite everything. The ceremony had already finished by the time he left. "You don't understand, little Ginny. Boys are like that, immature and childish," Cyrus said. "No, you're not like that," Ginny protested. "I'm not a child," Cyrus said, cutting the topic short. "All right, let's start tonight's tutoring. You shouldn't worry too much about charms or transfiguration this term, but you do need practice. What do you want to focus on?" "Defense against the dark arts. I borrowed Ron's textbook, and he also left me Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them." Last year's Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook, Dark Arts, A Guide to Self-Defense, covered many defensive spells and encounters with creatures, and Fantastic Beasts was an obvious supplementary read. Ginny had been planning to use Lockhart's second-hand book. She'd bought it at some expense. But Cyrus warned her it was essentially worthless beyond the occasional amusing anecdote and Lockhart's endless bragging. Ginny opened Fantastic Beasts. After Dumbledore's and Newt Scamander's forewords, the book asked, "What is an animal?" She found Ron's scribbled answer in the margin, a hairy guy with lots and lots of legs, and burst into laughter. It wasn't a correct definition, but it hit the nail on the head for Ron's fear of spiders. She found more of his notes. Beside the classification, the most dangerous creatures are marked XXXX, he'd added, or anything Hagrid likes. Ginny smiled. Hagrid was the huge man who ferried first years across the lake and had rescued Harry in Knockturn Alley that summer. Ron had talked at length about dragons and other fearsome beasts Hagrid adored, and it showed in his notebook. Beside Acromantula's 5 X's, Ron had added 4 more, turning it into a 9X creature, obvious proof of how terrified he was of spiders. Dark Arts, a guide to self-defense, contained spells not covered in charms: Repelling Charm, the Mucus Charm, Red Sparks, Green Sparks, plus variations on the lighting and extinguishing charms that she wouldn't see in first-year classes. Cyrus let Ginny read at her own pace and encouraged her to ask questions whenever she didn't understand. On the theory of defense against the dark arts, he had more than enough knowledge to teach. Perhaps few previous professors had matched his grasp of theory, certainly none outside of Dumbledore. New books need care, he added when she hesitated over a passage. If something strikes you as useful, bookmark it. Ginny bookmarked eagerly, already making notes. Tonight's tutoring had begun. 8. First possession time passed peacefully. Nothing major happened at Hogwarts during that period, except for the chaos Lockhart caused in his classes. Ginny had finally come to understand why Mr. Riddle despised Lockhart's books. "He's a good-for-nothing," Ron said more than once at meals, much to Hermione's dismay. Hermione remained an ardent fan of Lockhart. Even after seeing him make a fool of himself repeatedly, she still clung to the flattering portrait from the books. Over those weeks, Ginny grew increasingly dependent on and trusting of Mr. Riddle. She shared almost everything with Cyrus, her joys, her worries, her troubles, her fears, opening nearly her entire soul to him. Cyrus drank in her secrets and anxieties with greed. Now Ginny, she lifted her eyes. Her expression was different from usual. Perhaps it would be more accurate to call her Cyrus now. This was the first time Cyrus had tried to take control of Ginny's body since the start of term a few weeks before. He was extremely cautious, ready to back off at the first sign of trouble. In the end, though, it went even more smoothly than he had dared hope. He shoved a meat pie into his mouth and took a long swallow of pumpkin juice. Although not his own body, he could feel everything it felt. The food brightened his mood, and after breakfast, he planned to wander for a while. "Colin Creevey?" he called, turning toward the thin boy with the freckled, eager face by the table. "What is it, Miss Weasley?" Colin blinked in surprise. He hadn't yet spoken to this classmate since term began. "Please tell Professor McGonagall I'm feeling a bit unwell and need to lie down." Cyrus's voice was crisp, formal. "You don't look." Colin started, then stopped as Cyrus had already strode away. Cyrus drifted around the castle for a bit, then set off toward the edge of the grounds. He needed to find where the school kept its roosters and plan an opportunity to kill them all. Passing the training grounds, he followed a narrow path that led away from the castle and toward the forbidden forest. From the path, he could see the forest, its trees sprawling over several hills. Near the edge stood a small wooden hut. Hagrid was bending over in the pumpkin patch, the gourds towering almost as high as Ginny. "Hey!" Hagrid straightened and barked. "Little witch, go back! The forbidden forest's no place for you." "Hello, Hagrid. I'm not going in, just taking a walk." Cyrus kept walking slowly toward the pumpkins. "They're huge. Did you use an engorgement charm?" "Ah, it's you, little Weasley girl." Hagrid recognized Ginny and immediately softened, though he stayed wary. After everything Fred and George had put him through, he had a natural wariness about the Weasleys. "Just a bit o' help. They'll be bigger by Halloween. Want to come in and sit a bit?" "No, I'll just walk around." Cyrus had no intention of sampling Hagrid's questionable cooking and declined. "Don't worry, I won't go into the forbidden forest. I know it's dangerous." "That's good. You're more obedient than your two brothers." Hagrid sounded relieved. He liked the Weasley family, he always had, and he was fond of Harry, so that made him kindly toward Ginny as well. Cyrus skirted the edge of the forest and soon found the penned roosters. He felt Hagrid's gaze on him from time to time, as if the giant feared he might dash into the trees. With no opportunity to act, Cyrus turned and walked back. "The air's lovely," he said. "I'll be off now, Hagrid. I'll visit again." "You do that," Hagrid called after him, a little reluctantly. The hut near the forest often felt lonely. Even Harry and his friends didn't come over much. By the time Cyrus returned to the castle, classes had started and the corridors were empty. He picked up Ginny's wand and cast a disillusionment charm on himself, just in case. Ginny's wand, like Lord Voldemort's, was made of yew. Cyrus was surprised at how well it suited him. Yew symbolized death and rebirth. Fitting. The only drawback was that Ginny's magic was fairly weak, so the charm wasn't perfect. When he stood still, he was all but invisible, but any movement revealed a faint outline, like a film of raised glass. It would have to do if he moved carefully. Cautiously, he made his way toward the third-floor girls' lavatory. Just then, Filch's sharp voice rang out. "What's that? Have you found something? A student out of class?" Cyrus saw Filch following the scrawny cat, his face lit with excitement. Madame Norris had picked up his scent and was slinking with her head down toward where Cyrus stood. As she neared, the cat hesitated. Her nose lifted and her pace slowed, confusion in her eyes as she stared toward the corner of the wall. Filch peered in the same direction. "Nothing," he hissed under his breath. "They must be hiding. Casting spells, that's worse." Having patrolled Hogwarts for years, Filch knew some students used concealment spells. He'd seen imperfect disillusionment charms fail before. He reached out and began groping along the corridor as if blind and searching. The display looked comical, but it was effective, especially since Cyrus's charm showed when he moved. Cyrus had no time to lose. He risked the smallest movement necessary, lifted Ginny's wand and whispered the Confundus charm, aiming at Madame Norris. "Confundus!" Madame Norris yowled, all her fur on end, and leapt back, startling Filch. She bolted down the corridor as if she'd discovered a clue, and Filch limped after her, muttering and cursing. Cyrus let out a quiet breath and continued on to the third floor. 9. Chamber of Secrets and Basilisk. Since Myrtle had been killed by the basilisk 50 years ago, this bathroom had been all but abandoned. No one wanted to use the sinks and toilets, not because they were superstitious, but because no one wanted a head to pop out of the loo, bawling and wailing. Even among ghosts, Myrtle was unpopular, second only to the mischievous Peeves, and so gradually students had avoided the place entirely. When Cyrus entered, Myrtle was nowhere to be seen, probably flushed herself down into the black lake again. That was fine by him. He stood before the mirror, which reflected Ginny's lovely face. She looked different from how the movies had shown her, so much cuter, and Cyrus allowed himself a short smile before turning his attention to the copper faucet Riddle's memory had marked. A small, unobtrusive snake was carved along its side. "Open," he hissed. The sound came out as a terrifying, sibilant whisper. Having inherited many of Riddle's talents, Cyrus also had parcel tongue. The faucet flared with a dazzling white light and began to spin. The entire sink slid away, revealing a thick, dark pipe large enough for a person to crawl into. Cyrus dropped in without hesitation and, mindful of safety, closed the chamber door behind him. It felt like sliding down a dark, slimy, endless chute. Many smaller pipes branched off along the way, but none were as large as this one. Soon the shaft opened into a black rock tunnel. Cyrus cast a levitation charm to float and avoid landing in the mud. The passage was damp, stalactites from the ceiling dripped constantly, and the cave floor turned slick with the slow seepage from the black lake above. He had a taste for cleanliness, and the thought of those drops collecting centuries of filth made him shudder. Though, in truth, the lake's vastness and the filtering effect of the soil meant the water was not nearly as foul as his imagination suggested. Sunlight flash. A powerful ball of light shot from his wand and hovered above him like a small sun, bright enough to almost illuminate the whole tunnel. Ahead lay the shed skin of a massive serpent, the ancient, desiccated hide of a basilisk. It was enormous, the discarded husk of a creature whose mouth alone would have swallowed an adult. Voldemort had paid it no mind, but Cyrus found it fascinating. Basilisks were not common in Britain. If any existed elsewhere, they rarely reached this size or age. I can figure out a way to take it with me, he thought. Basilisk's skin resisted magic. Whether fashioned into armor or used as a rare potion ingredient, it was priceless. Removing it wouldn't be impossible. An undetectable extension charm applied to a travel trunk and a well-timed opportunity during the Christmas holiday would do the trick. He bypassed the shed skin and continued. The tunnel twisted and finally ended at a solid stone wall carved with two coiling snakes, their eyes inlaid with gleaming emeralds. "Open," he hissed again. The snakes split, the stone wall slid apart with a grinding sound. Beyond it lay the Chamber of Secrets, a long, dim hall ringed with stone pillars carved into enormous serpents whose coils rose to support a ceiling that dissolved into shadow. A greenish light washed the hall in an eerie glow, and the pillars cast long, uncanny shadows. Cyrus walked between the carved snakes, Ginny's wand clenched in his hand. He felt strangely at home here, as if returning to a familiar place. His footsteps echoed hollowly among the ghostly walls. When he reached the last pair of pillars, a gigantic stone statue loomed against the far wall. It was a wizened, monkey-like face with a sparse beard trailing to the hem of a carved wizard's robe, and two huge stone feet planted on the floor. Slytherin himself, then. The statue's features were ugly, but appearance mattered little here. Cyrus looked up at the towering face, and with as much ceremony as he could muster, addressed it. "Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the 4 founders of Hogwarts." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enormous stone mouth opened, a widening black hole. Cyrus closed his eyes, careful not to meet the basilisk's dreaded gaze should any of its eyes appear. He heard movement within the statue, something slithering, dragging itself up from deep inside. A heavy crash rattled the chamber, dust falling from above as the floor trembled. The long, heavy rustle of scales scraped the ground. When he dared open his eyes, the basilisk had revealed itself. Its scales were a deep green that shimmered with iridescent colors. Its immense body swept the chamber floor in a slow, sinuous circle around Cyrus. It rose behind him, its head towering above, eyes larger than light bulbs suspended at his level. The creature's obedience was proof of Parseltongue's power. Innate Parseltongue compelled snakes. Learned Parseltongue alone could not command them in the same way. 50 years of slumber had been only a blink to the basilisk, and now it moved as if reborn, its terrible magic barely restrained. "Quiet," Cyrus ordered. The basilisk lowered its head immediately. "Don't worry," he murmured, a small smile pulling at his lips. "You'll be free to move soon. For now, we must wait." He had come only to check the beast's condition. The attack, when it came, would be saved for Halloween. Nothing quite felt like it without a bit of theatrical terror, and who could say that the festival of ghosts and masks didn't carry its own kind of magic? Chapter 10. Ginny's Suspicions. The next morning, Ginny swung her legs out of bed, rubbing at a headache that made her feel oddly groggy. She hadn't slept well, but she couldn't afford to lie there. If she did, classes would start without her. She dressed, brushed her hair, and washed quickly. When she went back to her room for her books, her dormmates were still asleep. "Hey, wake up! We'll be late for class," she called. A head popped out from behind the curtain next door. "Ginny, are you still half asleep?" "It's the weekend." "The weekend?" Ginny's eyes went wide. That couldn't be right. She remembered it being Thursday when she went to bed. Had she slept through an entire day? "Of course it's the weekend," her roommate said. "Wasn't yesterday Friday? You said you weren't feeling well, and Colin even got leave for you. Are you still sick? Want to go to the hospital wing?" "It's nothing. I must have misremembered." Ginny scratched her head, sat back on the edge of her bed, and glanced at her little desk. Nothing lay on top, but the diary was tucked away in the drawer. Mr. Riddle. She felt that tug of suspicion again, but kept it to herself. If she told her parents about the diary, they'd scold her, maybe even send a howler, and she couldn't bear the thought. On the other hand, she wasn't ready to believe Mr. Riddle would hurt her. She'd lost a small chunk of memory, true, but she wasn't physically harmed. Maybe he had a reason. She wanted to open the diary and find out everything, but her hand hesitated on the drawer. What if it was all a setup? What if Mr. Riddle had been gaining her trust only to betray her? She realized how little she actually knew about Tom Riddle. All she'd seen were the honors in the trophy room. Beyond that, who was he? He seemed clever and intriguing, more interesting than Percy, less rigid. He'd encouraged her to break little school rules, taught her hexes you couldn't learn from textbooks, and told her to use them if she ever had to stand up for herself. He wasn't like Percy at all. If she had to compare, he was more like Bill. The thought cheered her. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted to trust him. But the question remained, was Mr. Riddle really behind what had happened? And if so, why? Should she keep talking to him? The uncertainty gnawed at her and made it hard to sleep. Ginny left the dorm and drifted toward the common room. "Hey, Ginny," Ron called, his eyes still bleary. "Can you help wake Hermione? Harry's gone to practice Quidditch this morning. We're going to watch. You coming?" "I'm not really in the mood," Ginny said with a small shrug, then turned to find Hermione's dormitory. A few minutes later, the three of them hurried down together. "Are you sure you don't want to come?" Ron asked, suddenly more awake. His sister usually worshipped Harry and would never miss a chance to watch him play. This lukewarm response puzzled him, but he was used to seeing past legends. Harry was a friend first, a legend second. Ginny thought of how Mr. Riddle had sometimes brightened her mood, and since she had nothing better to do, and since the diary had, bizarrely, taken care of her weekend homework, she agreed. All right. They grabbed breakfast in the Great Hall and went to the Quidditch pitch. The stands were almost empty, the morning mist still clinging to the grass. Colin kept flitting around with his camera, snapping pictures like mad. Soon, the Gryffindor team appeared in their Quidditch robes for practice. Wood looked worn out from lecturing on tactics. Harry complained he was starving, even as Wood pushed him out on his Nimbus 2000. Practice barely got going before it was interrupted. Colin's relentless photographing had put Wood on edge. He suspected a spy, someone sent to steal their new tactics. "Slytherin doesn't need spies," George said with a wry shake of his head. "How do you know?" someone asked. "Because they're already here." A cluster of students in green strode onto the pitch, broomsticks in hand. The Slytherin team. Wood swooped down angrily, and tensions flared between the two sides. "What's going on?" Hermione whispered, tugging Ginny back from her thoughts. "They're arguing. Let's go see." Ron sprang down the steps, ready to jump into the middle if it came to blows. As they hurried closer, Ginny's eyes landed on a pale-haired boy in the Slytherin ranks, Draco Malfoy. She knew him well enough. Over the summer, his father had had a public spat with hers in Flourish and Blots. The old rivalry made the air between the houses feel even thinner, and Ginny braced herself for what might come next. 11. Grumpy Ginny. "What's he doing here?" Ron blurted out. "What's wrong?" "I'm the new seeker for the Slytherin team, Weasley," Draco Malfoy said with a smug tilt. "Everyone was just admiring the new brooms my father bought for our side." Ron stared at the 7 high-end brooms lined up on the pitch, Nimbus 2001s, even better than Harry's Nimbus 2000. "Nice, aren't they?" Malfoy went on amiably. "But maybe the Gryffindor team could scrape together some coin too. Sell a few of those shooting stars of yours. Surely a museum would pay for them." The Slytherins howled with laughter. "At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their place," Hermione snapped. "They made it on merit." Malfoy's smile curled into a sneer. He answered with a single vicious word. "No one asked you, you filthy little mudblood." Everything exploded at once. Fred and George bristled to spring. Marcus Flint had to move in front of Malfoy to keep them back. Alicia gave a terrified shriek. Ron, white-hot with fury, lurched under Flint's arm, pulled out his wand, and yelled, "You'll pay for that, Malfoy!" He jabbed his wand toward Malfoy and shouted, "Eat slugs!" There was a flash and a green jet of light. It struck Ron in the stomach, knocking him back 2 steps. He fell to his knees on the grass and opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a huge, sodden belch, and then a number of slimy slugs slid into his lap. Gryffindor clustered around Ron without wanting to touch him. Slugs, glistening and wriggling, kept tumbling from his mouth. The Slytherins erupted in laughter. Flint doubled over on his new broom, laughing so hard he could hardly stand. Malfoy was on all fours, pounding the turf with his fists. Something in Ginny snapped. The insult, one of those filthy words, rang in her ears. Seeing Ron like that set her blood boiling. Ginny had already been on edge, and Malfoy's cruelty was the spark. "Furnunculus," she shot. Her hex sped off her wand, but missed Draco, slamming instead into Marcus Flint, who was still standing in front of him. Flint screamed. His skin seemed to sear and bubble. Ugly, angry boils rose up as if hot oil had been poured over an open wound. He swiveled and glared at Ginny, wand raised and hatred written across his face. "You little brat, how dare you!" Fred and George lunged at him instantly, trying to grab his wand. Wood and the others moved too, pushing, shoving, fingers and arms were everywhere as the teams brawled. Someone shouted, "Harry, get Ginny and Ron out of here!" Harry reacted at once, helping a messy, still puking Ron to his feet. "Hagrid's, quick," he said. It was the nearest place they could get to in a hurry. They forced their way through the milling crowd and ran. Colin Creevey, oblivious to anything but a good shot, sprinted after them with his camera already up. "Get out of the way, Creevey!" Ginny snapped and shoved him aside. Colin stood frozen, bewildered. Yesterday, Ginny had been so polite. They reached Hagrid's hut, only to see Gilderoy Lockhart striding out into the yard. Harry pulled them back to hide. It was a good call. If Lockhart had tried to treat Ron, he'd probably have done more harm than good. When Lockhart finally wandered off, they knocked and went in. "It's you lot, thought Lockhart was back," Hagrid said, alarmed when he saw them. "What's happened to Ron?" "His spell backfired on him," Hermione said. Hagrid didn't look overly worried. He set a large brass basin on the floor. "Better out than in, Ron. Get it all out." Hermione hovered, pale and anxious. "I don't think there's much we can do except wait. That hex is nasty to break, and you were using a broken wand. Wait, maybe I can stop it." Ginny's face had gone earnest. "There's a counter curse for hexes. Someone taught me." She took a breath, pointed her wand at Ron. The others tensed. Being pointed at by anyone's wand felt dangerous. Ron gagged between retches. "Will this work? It's better to try than do nothing," Ginny said. Her wand glowed. After she cast, Ron shivered all over. He kept coughing and spluttering, but the stream of slugs stopped. No more came. Everyone stared. "It worked. How did you do that?" Hermione's voice was incredulous. She was staring at Ginny as if she had discovered a rare charm nobody else knew. Ginny brightened. The boil jinx she'd used on Flint and this counter curse were both things Mr. Riddle had shown her, proof in her mind that he hadn't lied. I read it in a book," Ginny stammered, eager to seem ordinary and practical. "What book?" Hermione's eyes glittered. She wanted details. "Maybe I remembered wrong. Maybe it was Bill." "Yeah, Bill showed me," Ginny said quickly, cheeks flushing. Hermione looked doubtful, but Hagrid cut in. "Right, tell me everything," they told him. Harry described Malfoy's insult. Ron, hoarse and sweating but much recovered, managed to say, "He called Hermione a mudblood, Hagrid." Hagrid's face went red with anger. "Is that true?" "It is," Hermione said. "I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was nasty." "Mudblood's a horrible name for a muggle-born, meaning their parents aren't magic," Ron said between coughs. "Some wizards, like the Malfoys, think purebloods are better than everyone else." He let out a harsh, crooked laugh. "Most of us know it doesn't matter. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood, and he can't boil a kettle without an explosion." "That's right. Hermione can do things real clever wizards haven't even thought of yet." Hagrid put in proudly, making Hermione blush. "And I didn't think little Ginny'd stand up like that neither." Ginny looked over at Ron, still a little annoyed that her hex had hit Flint and not Malfoy. "Too bad it didn't catch that annoying Malfoy," she muttered. "It's probably for the best," Hagrid said. "Malfoy's father's one of the governors. Could be a right mess if you'd got him proper." They stayed at Hagrid's for a while. Ginny's spirits lifted as she realized the things Mr. Riddle had taught her were unexpectedly useful. Even later, when McGonagall gave Ginny detention back at the castle, it couldn't dampen her mood much. She'd stood up for Ron, she'd helped stop the worst of the spell, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 12, I Just Had a Good Teacher. "You're back, Potter, and the two Weasleys," Professor McGonagall said as she strode toward them, her face severe. "The three of you will have detention tonight." She couldn't help glancing at Ginny, incredulous and very upset. "I never imagined a first year would dare cast a spell on a sixth year. I've already informed your parents." Ginny's face drained white. She pictured a howler in the morning and felt a cold dread. You, Weasley, will help Mr. Filch polish the silver in the trophy room. No magic, all by hand. And you, Miss Weasley, I see your spells are quite good, so go see Professor Flitwick. As for you, Potter, you will help Professor Lockhart reply to his admirers. Harry felt his stomach clench. The thing he least wanted this semester was to spend time with Lockhart, narcissistic, incompetent, and endlessly insufferable. He would have taken Filch any day. How about I polish the trophies too? He pleaded. McGonagall raised an eyebrow, clearly amused that her students disliked Lockhart. But of course not. Professor Lockhart specifically requested you. The three of you remember. 8 o'clock tonight. If it were that easy, it wouldn't be a punishment. Please, Professor. Is there anything else, Miss Weasley? McGonagall cut him off. I want to ask, what about those Slytherins? Don't they get punished for insulting classmates? Ginny said, meeting McGonagall's eye. Harry, Ron, and Hermione watched in surprise and admiration. No first year had ever spoken to McGonagall like that before. Of course they were punished. Professor Snape will deal with them personally. With that, McGonagall turned and left. Did she just say Snape will punish them? Ron said loudly. Does she not understand that's the same as letting them off? All four of them scowled. They assumed Snape would cover for the Slytherins. This time, though, they were wrong. After Ginny's nasty curse on Marcus nearly sparked a full-blown brawl between the houses, McGonagall and Snape had both intervened. Snape, who knew the whole story, didn't hesitate to punish Malfoy. Malfoy had been stripped of some privileges and practically banished to the Slytherin bathrooms for the time being. At 8 o'clock that evening, Ginny slipped alone onto the 8th floor. The Ravenclaw prefect's office was near the west tower. She counted 13 windows to the right before knocking. Come in, came Professor Flitwick's high, clipped voice. Professor, I'm sorry to disturb you, Ginny said. Ah, Miss Weasley, you're finally here. Flitwick's face broke into a delighted smile. He was small, no more than a meter or so, and slight, but among the 4 deans he was the most concerned for his students. Very punctual. Perhaps I should have come earlier, Ginny asked softly. It was her first detention. She was nervous. Ron was polishing trophies, and Harry was stuck with Lockhart. McGonagall hadn't said exactly what Flitwick wanted her to do, and Ginny worried she'd be assigned some tedious task. Flitwick read her concern at once. Don't worry, child. I don't have any of those tiresome physical chores. Rather than that, he went on, I'd prefer to teach you more about spells. You did very well in class. My expectations for you may be a bit higher. He waved his wand, and a drawer slid open. Several small cakes hopped out and arranged themselves in front of Ginny. Have one? Thank you, Professor. Ginny relaxed and took a cake. Far better than the toffee she'd had with Hagrid that morning. I heard you cast a nasty curse on a 6th year? Flitwick said conversationally. Ginny nodded. I already know what happened, he said. Although it's not quite fitting for a professor to say he deserved it. Flitwick, who came from a family with goblin blood, was sensitive to slights against less prominent students. Of course, we still discourage casting spells on classmates, he added with a wave of the hand. But if you can manage a nasty curse like that, the rest of first-year charms shouldn't trouble you. He watched her expectantly. Ginny demonstrated. The levitation charm first, then the softening charm and the locking charm. She used a severing charm to make a clean gash in the tabletop, and then repaired it with a mending charm. Flitwick was delighted. Excellent, Ginny, excellent, he cried, practically bouncing. I'm already considering inviting you to my charms club. Honestly, your performance is even better than Miss Granger's. Ginny flushed. She knew it was all thanks to Mr. Riddle's guidance. Without him, she wouldn't have cast like that. I just had a good teacher, she said shyly. Flitwick took that as a compliment, and in high spirits he excused her from detention. All right, you may go. If you ever have trouble with charms or want to borrow books from the library, do come to me. Keep up this level of work, and by 5th year, I'll invite you to join the Charms Club outright. If you like, you may even audit our meetings now. He gave her the time and place for the club before reluctantly seeing her out. 13. Green Tea Guru Cyrus Ginny was back in the Gryffindor common room in less than 5 minutes. The common rooms for Gryffindor and Ravenclaw were both in towers, though on opposite sides. Those towers opened onto the 8th floor of the castle. Hogwarts had 5 towers in all. The tallest central tower held the astronomy classroom, while the other 4 sat to the northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest. The North Tower housed divination, the West Tower was the owlery, and the southeast towers were used as the common rooms and dormitories for Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. When Ginny slipped in beneath the fat lady's portrait, a few people looked up in surprise. "Ginny, didn't you go to detention with Ron and the others?" Percy frowned. He was in a sour mood. Everyone in the Weasley family except him had detention that day, and the whole Gryffindor team hadn't been spared either. "That's right, but Professor Flitwick said my spellcasting was excellent and that I shouldn't waste time in detention," Ginny said quickly. Percy brightened. "Well done. I always say, being a good student never hurts. Look, Hermione wasn't punished this time either. If you ask me, we've got a duty to uphold the Weasley name." He started to walk off. "Where are you going so late?" "Just a small matter," he said vaguely. Ginny didn't press him. She had no time to lose. She needed to find Mr. Riddle. Back in the dormitory, she used a spell to unlock her drawer, laid the black-covered diary out on her desk, and set the ink-dipped quill hovering over the yellowed pages. Her hand shook a little as she took a breath and put the pen to paper. "Mr. Riddle, there's something I want to ask you." Once she'd written the first sentence, she couldn't stop. When she first thought about asking, she had imagined it would be hard, but the words flowed now, and she wrote until she reached the bottom of the page. "I lost a day of memory. I clearly remember it was Thursday when I went to sleep, but when I woke up it was Saturday. My classmates say I took Friday off, but I don't remember any of it. What do you think is wrong with me?" She kept the question careful, not wanting to sound like she suspected the diary. At the same time, there was a small, secret hope in her chest that it had nothing to do with Mr. Riddle. She watched the ink fade on the paper and felt an odd tightness under her ribs, like someone inside her chest hammering so she could barely breathe. "Could it be you, Mr. Riddle? I've been discovered?" In the memory space, Cyrus read the long paragraph of sentences and considered how to answer. Ginny still trusted him. If he denied everything or blamed something else, she might believe him. He toyed with different tactics. In the end, he decided that the truth, framed the right way, would be more persuasive than a bare lie. "You found out, huh? I was going to keep it a secret. I'm sorry, Ginny." Cyrus let his voice sound contrite. "Actually, I controlled your body. As an evil magical object, I suppose you should destroy me." "It was you," Ginny wrote slowly, disbelief and hurt mingling on the paper. She had suspected as much, but hearing it admitted made it worse. "But why?" Cyrus adopted a solemn, remorseful tone. "Ginny, whatever my reasons, my actions are inexcusable. A magical item controlling a witch's body is unforgivable. If something like me happened to you, I would destroy it immediately. You should do the same. Destroy me, Ginny. I'm only a diary." "No." Ginny's pen stabbed at the paper. "I don't think you're entirely evil. Helping me finish my homework over the weekend doesn't seem like a harmful thing to do. There must be another reason." Cyrus watched as she leapt to find an excuse for him before he even spoke. People wanted to believe what made them comfortable. He waited, letting the silence do some of the work, then chose his next words carefully. "You're right," he wrote, his voice threaded with a melancholy that made Ginny's shoulders slump. "I should have told you sooner. I'm a little of Tom Riddle's memory that was left in this diary." Ginny made a small noise. "Then have you ever wondered where the real Tom Riddle is now?" "The real Tom Riddle." She murmured the name, and the idea fit into the gaps she already had. The trophies in the hall were decades old. Whatever Tom Riddle had been, it had belonged to a different era. "Could it be, Mr. Riddle, that you're already?" "That's right. I've been dead for many years." Cyrus wove grief into his words, the kind that made Ginny's eyes fill. "My death was connected to you-know-who. He was rampant in that time." "You were killed by you-know-who?" Ginny wrote, and her belief in him deepened immediately. Cyrus kept turning the knife. "I was made into a diary back when I was a student. For decades I've been trapped in those pages. I've missed the world for so long. To breathe again, even as a fragment, is something I've wanted more than anything." Ginny's tears started to fall. Although in her heart she had already suspected the diary's voice was ancient, she hadn't imagined it had met such a tragic end at the hands of you-know-who. She didn't notice inconsistencies in Cyrus's story. How, in the summer, he had said he'd graduated, her grief drowned out doubt. Cyrus kept up the show of penitence, blaming himself and calling his actions unforgivable. The more he spoke of his suffering, the more her pity grew. "Ginny," he said finally, softer now, "destroy me or give me to a professor. But before you do, please, let me see you once more. Thank you for talking to me. Being trapped in a diary for decades has been a dreadful torment." Ginny stared at the words, the ink drying slowly. Her hand trembled, but she could not bring herself to write the sentence he wanted. 14. "The man is half drunk and will act until you cry, 'Meet Mr. Riddle.'" Ginny stared, stunned. A tiny voice in the back of her head warned her. Never do that. Trusting a magical object was foolish and dangerous. But curiosity pricked at her like a cat. What would the real Mr. Riddle be like? She had never truly understood him, and now the chance was right in front of her. But how do I do it? Temptation drowned out her caution, and Cyrus had already won the little girl's trust, so she hardly suspected danger. Cyrus beamed when she agreed. If Lord Voldemort had any praiseworthy quality beyond his talent for magic, it was probably the body Rowling described as the most handsome in the books. Before Tom Riddle turned to the dark arts, he'd used that charm to deceive many women. Even now, a victim's soul still wandered the Ravenclaw Tower at Hogwarts, proof that the descendant of Ravenclaw, the wisest of the founders, could still be made a foolish, love-struck fool. Ginny felt a foolish sympathy for him. "You just need to bury your face in the book," Cyrus said. "I'll bring you into my memories." The diary seemed to catch a gust of wind. Its pages rustled and flipped until they stopped on one particular sheet. Ginny watched, stunned, as the page turned into a little window like a tiny television. Her hands trembling, she brought the book up and pressed her face to the little pane. Before she had time to wonder, her body tipped forward. The window widened. She felt herself lift from the chair and fall, her forehead pushing through the opening into a whirl of color and light. She landed in a dim, gray place, silver mist flowing like morning fog, both light and heavy at once. Ginny cast her eyes around nervously, searching for any sign of Mr. Riddle. Cyrus did not hide. He stood a short distance away, holding an empty, phantom wand, tilting his head and smiling as he watched her. "Mr. Riddle?" Ginny asked tentatively. "Hello, Ginny," Cyrus replied, and the warmth in his voice turned her tension into excitement. She hurried toward him, examining him with wide eyes. She had never expected Mr. Riddle, the voice who'd been speaking through the diary, to be so handsome. "Are you really Mr. Riddle? To be precise, this is just his memory," Cyrus said cleverly, trying to be truthful without sounding like one. "I suppose you're surprised. You probably never guessed I was a Slytherin, did you?" He indicated the robes he wore. "I didn't think so. Why would Mr. Riddle always urge me to break the rules?" Ginny grumbled. She didn't seem to have much respect for Slytherin. Since she'd come in, her eyes hadn't left Cyrus's face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You look a bit like Harry," Ginny said, hesitant, then quickly added, "just a little." "Coincidences like that aren't impossible." Cyrus smiled. He knew better. The blood ties between Riddle and Harry ran deep, back to the tales of the three brothers. "But Ginny, you're much cuter than I imagined," he added without hesitation. Ginny flushed and fell silent, looking away. Handling an 11-year-old was far too easy for Cyrus. Her gaze wandered over the gray space and turned sad. "Has Mr. Riddle been staying in a place like this for 50 years? She asked. Everything here looked empty and cold, like a winter jungle stripped of life. The silver mist felt suffocating just to look at. It was unbearable to imagine existing here for 50 years. She thought she'd have gone mad after a single day. Poor Mr. Riddle. He only wanted to see the real world. What harm was that? He even helped me with my homework." Ginny wanted to reach out to hug him, but her small hand passed straight through Cyrus's arm. "It's no use, Ginny. I'm just a memory," Cyrus said. "I can see and hear, but I can't touch or feel. The day I shamelessly took control of your body, that's the only time I felt alive. The blue sky, the wind, the warm sun on my skin, being alive is incredible, don't you think? I even had a proper meal in the dining hall." He smiled, content in a way that made Ginny more upset. Tears nearly spilled down her cheeks. "All right," Cyrus said suddenly, his tone sharpening. "That's enough, Ginny." His reprimand made her flinch. Then his voice softened. "You should go back." "But go quickly," he insisted. "Staying with something like me, already dead, not even a ghost, isn't good for you. When you go back, destroy the diary. If your magic isn't strong enough, give it to someone who can. We should say goodbye. It was a pleasure meeting you, Ginny." He put on a farewell like a cloak, and his figure began to thin, becoming transparent and ephemeral, dissolving into the silver mist. "No," Ginny bit her lip, tears streaking straight down her face, shaking her head. "Be reasonable, Ginny. Maybe destruction is the only proper end for a memory like me," Cyrus murmured. "No!" Ginny shook her head resolutely. "Mr. Riddle is my friend. I will never kill Mr. Riddle." "You'll make new friends. Real friends." Cyrus pressed the point. "That's not the same." "But is Mr. Riddle going to harm me? Is he going to take my life?" Ginny shot back quickly. "Of course not." Cyrus denied it fiercely. It was the truth. "If that's true, why should I destroy him?" Ginny wiped her tears and straightened her voice. She was unusually brave at that moment. "Mr. Riddle longs to see the real world. I can help." "You mean lend your body to Mr. Riddle sometimes?" Cyrus finished for her. The little girl looked earnest and sincere. For a terrible moment, Cyrus felt like he deserved to die, and yet he found that he wanted to live. "Thank you, Ginny." 15. Charm practice. An unsuccessful Patronus. The next morning, Ginny arrived at the Great Hall, still half asleep and hardly believing what had happened the night before. She had actually agreed to Mr. Riddle's request to borrow her body and then let him use it again that same night. Nothing had gone wrong. If anything, she felt strangely reassured that he genuinely wouldn't hurt her. She spread jam on her bread with a dazed hand and mechanically shoved it into her mouth. A piercing sound cut through the hall and jolted her fully awake. "Ron, how dare you cast a spell on your classmate? And you even led your sister astray. It hasn't even been a month since school started. How could you do such a thing? And you too, Fred, George." A red letter hovering above the Gryffindor table had transformed into a mouth and was bellowing. It had already finished scolding Ron and the twins and then turned toward Ginny. Her face drained of color. She had completely forgotten that Professor McGonagall had informed Mother about her casting a spell on an older student. To be bawled out in front of everyone felt unbearable. Her classmates to either side of her had already hopped away, not wanting to be caught in the Howler's wrath. To Ginny's surprise, when the Howler surged toward her, Molly Weasley's voice softened. "I've heard everything, little Ginny. I must say, you did well. Don't worry, no one's angry with your father. If Percy was cursed by a first year, what can we say? Of course, don't be so impulsive next time. Tell the professors if you run into trouble, okay? See you at Christmas." With that, the Howler burst into flames. Ron and the twins looked put out. If anyone had been misbehaving, it was Ginny. In fact, only her spell had worked. Yet Ron and the twins had been the ones scolded. "Do you think that's fair?" Ron muttered indignantly. "All right, who told her she's my sister?" Fred and George were more philosophical. Besides, Ginny was brilliant yesterday. News of Ginny's success had spread through Gryffindor. She'd become something of a heroine, and Ron felt slightly deflated. He picked at a chicken leg and glowered. "I'm not jealous of her. She's my sister. I just think it's unfair, like I always have bad luck," he grumped, glancing at his patched wand. If not for that thing breaking, maybe his spell would have worked too. "Look on the bright side. You might still be spitting slugs if she hadn't helped," Hermione comforted. "I just hope Marcus Flint doesn't get discharged before the official match," Harry said with a weak smile, then quietly relayed the strange voice he'd heard the night before to Ron and Hermione. He'd already mentioned it to Ron the previous evening, but none of them had any answers. At night over the coming days, Cyrus slipped out in Ginny's form more often. He wasn't moving to free the basilisk or to kill. His plan hadn't truly started yet. Mostly he practiced in the room of requirement. Having absorbed Riddle's memories in theory, Cyrus still had to learn the skill. Theory and practical spell work were not the same. He knew the magic he would need after his resurrection had to be strong, and so he trained, drawing on Ginny's life force slowly and carefully so as not to destroy her. By day, she looked as if she'd caught a cold, By night, she spent time propped up with Percy's anxious ministrations and stimulating potions. Steam seemed to rise perpetually from her head, and her fiery hair looked almost aflame. In the spacious classroom, a row of enchanted wooden dummies surged forward. Ginny, Cyrus in Ginny's body, stood with a yew wand in her hand, eyes cold and composed. When the lead dummy lunged, Cyrus reacted like lightning, flicking his wand. The first dummy exploded into dust. He rolled to avoid the other two attacks, and without a hint of panic, spun to split them in half. Those halves floated under his control, slamming into nearby dummies like meteorites and toppling them. The floor itself swelled and formed several huge hands that gripped the remaining dummies, holding them immobile. In an instant, a dozen dummies were neutralized. Cyrus didn't even speak an incantation aloud. A first-year's body with a fraction of Riddle's skill had produced a surprisingly impressive display, especially against dummies protected by basic enchantments. Satisfied, he decided to try a Patronus charm. He closed his eyes and searched for what he could call a happy memory. His childhood recollections were the clearest, simpler joys, fairy tales, a carefree sense of wonder. He felt magic thread from the tip of the wand like white silk, like velvet strands spun in the air. They wove and shimmered, but never formed a distinct shape. Not quite, he thought. Perhaps the memories were too distant, or perhaps his emotions were too muted for a true Patronus. He tried again, reaching further back for that untroubled feeling when the world had seemed vivid and clean. Expecto Patronum, he cried. The surge of power from the wand was stronger this time. Dense silver threads gathered into a bright mass, but it still refused to coalesce into a corporeal form. Instead, it hung there like a luminous white cloud. Ginny's, his magic ebbed. Cyrus's reserves were drained. He had no choice but to stop, carefully sheath his wand, and leave the room of requirement. As he turned the corner, a sharp voice in his ear cut through the silence. Stop! 16. Halloween attack. It was Filch again. Cyrus's patience with the cantankerous caretaker was fraying. What bothered him more, though, was the cat. Madame Norris must have Kneasel blood. Her nose was alarmingly keen, and she seemed to sense traces of magic. Cyrus had come inches from exposure several times because of her. Otherwise, a mere squib like Filch wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. It was especially dangerous if he ran into Filch and Snape on the same night. Stop! Don't move! I've found you! Filch bellowed into the corridor, addressing nothing visible. Cyrus stood directly behind him, cloak and disillusionment charm hiding him completely. Madame Norris had followed his scent all the way to the entrance of the room of requirement and found nothing. After checking that the charm had held, Cyrus slipped away at once. Peeves's mocking laughter drifted down the passage behind him. Poor Filch, turned around in circles. The caretaker and the poltergeist immediately began squabbling, which suited Cyrus just fine. Halloween was nearly upon them, and the timing felt right. Hogwarts looked different on the eve of Halloween. Pumpkins in Hagrid's patch had swelled to the size of sheds, some hollowed out into grotesque jack-o'-lanterns, the rest pulped into mountains of steaming pumpkin juice for the feasts. Bats hung from the ceilings, and ghosts normally at their most active seemed particularly lively. Except, curiously, Peeves was harder to find than usual. Sir Nicholas was celebrating his 500th death day, and the castle's usual chaos had quieted in deference. At the Great Hall, Percy peered around the table with a frown. The twins and Lee Jordan were clustered together, barely containing themselves. Percy reached out and grabbed one of the twins by the sleeve. Fred, where's Ron? Harry and Hermione aren't here either. I'm George. How can you still call me Fred? The grabbed twin snapped, widening his eyes in mock offense. He wasn't actually prankish this time. Percy had genuinely mistaken him for his brother. Sorry, Percy muttered. Want to know where little Ronnie ran off to? The twin offered, eyes lighting up. It's amazing, really. The other chimed in, smirking. A ghost party. Can you imagine? Eating rotten meat. A ghost party? Percy repeated flatly. It's nearly Headless Nick's 500th death day, Fred, no, George, explained, shaking his head with amusement. If you ask me, he's a little full of himself, celebrating his own death date. The twins were clearly enjoying the idea. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had overheard and briefly considered going to Nick's party, but when they asked the twins for details, the joke lost its appeal. Hot food and pumpkin juice in the Great Hall sounded preferable. "Why aren't you worried about your sister? Ginny isn't here either," George added, glancing toward the younger Gryffindors. There was no conspicuous shock of red in sight. "She's been feeling poorly. She'll come later," Percy said stiffly. "She's had a cold for weeks. You should be more concerned about her." All the teachers and students were gathered in the hall that night. Even Filch was present, though his cat continued her unpleasant patrols through the corridors. The animal had picked up a familiar scent and was determined to find its owner. This time, the prey had eluded her one too many times, and Madame Norris's competitive streak flared. She tracked the trail up to the third-floor corridor. Cyrus was sitting on the basilisk's head, controlling Ginny's body. He had been keeping the great serpent curled in the pipes beneath the school, and now it was time for it to take a walk. Myrtle was conveniently at Nick's party, so the usually occupied girls' lavatory was empty. Madame Norris crept along the corridor, nose lowered to the seep of scent. The bathroom floor shone with pooled water from a leaky pipe, and the cat skirted it disdainfully. As she reached the entrance, two dim yellow reflections appeared in the water. She had no time to react. The basilisk's eyes caught her, even viewed indirectly in the puddle, and she froze, utterly petrified. "Finally, the annoying thing is quiet," Cyrus said softly. He stepped down from the serpent's head and picked up the rigid, stone-cold form. The cat was as hard as iron. He hung her on the wall, and a streak of blood scrawled across the stone beneath where she dangled. Then he returned the basilisk to the Chamber of Secrets, where it lay waiting for him in the pipes until summoned, and he slipped back to the feast. He restored Ginny to her body. She opened her eyes at the Gryffindor table, feeling faintly disoriented but not surprised. A presence had been inside her. She knew, with a chill certainty, that Mr. Riddle had been occupying her. He hadn't celebrated Halloween in 50 years, which explained why he had missed the school revelry. This somehow made sense. Ginny's appetite, however, was unshaken. The sight and smell of the feast drew her in, and she began to eat with the rest of them. Colin glanced over at her, puzzled to see her eating so heartily despite seeming unwell. It was, in a way, a relief. Dinner finished quickly. Ginny followed the others back toward the common room. Strangely, Draco Malfoy had shadowed them without anyone noticing. He slunk along with the group, angling them to the third floor. Conversation fell away as they entered the corridor. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the sight that met them, the petrified cat hanging from the wall, and beneath it, a line of blood-red letters. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Malfoy darted forward when he saw Harry standing near the message and read the writing aloud with triumphant relish. The sight of the cat, the gruesome message, and the sudden, choking silence in the corridor flushed his pale face with a cruel color. A vindictive smile curved his lips. "Next, it will be you, mudbloods." Time rewound to the start of the feast. The Slytherin table was loud enough, but the mood, typical of snakes, was nothing like the boisterous cheer of Gryffindor. Malfoy picked at his food, thinking whether Halloween would be a good excuse to give Harry Potter and those Gryffindor ruffians a proper fright for getting him into trouble with Snape. He tried to glance toward the Gryffindor table, but didn't see any sign of them. At that point, he hadn't suspected anything. Gryffindors didn't sit with the same neat order Slytherins did. They always shoved into whatever seat was free. He also didn't dare stare openly. If any of the other Slytherins saw him watching them, they'd think he was going to betray the house. Once an idea took hold, it turned quickly into action. Before the feast ended, Malfoy had decided to make his move that night. Even if he were caught, he could call it a Halloween prank and hope no real punishment would follow. So when the hall emptied, he didn't return to the Slytherin table but blended into the Ravenclaw group instead. What happened next convinced him he'd been right to join in. Whoever was behind the message on the wall was a genius. Malfoy still thought it was a prank. After Slytherin's heavy loss at the last Quidditch match, Flint had been blasted by a blistering hex and looked dreadful. Someone surely wanted revenge. And the Chamber of Secrets? A thing Slytherin might have left behind? No way it had really been opened by a half-blood, a mudblood, or a so-called disgrace. In his mind, it was a joke aimed to humiliate Gryffindor, and he was more than happy to fan the flames. So he read the words on the wall aloud, loud enough for everyone to hear. The hall erupted. Under 100 staring faces, the three Gryffindors' panic was obvious. Harry regretted not listening to Ron and slipping away earlier, but it was too late now. Malfoy's announcement attracted Filch first, the thin, miserable caretaker clutching Madame Norris like she was his whole world. Harry had no doubt that, if he could, Filch would gladly make him pay with his life for harming the cat. You killed my cat! You killed her! I'm going to kill you! I'm going! Argus? Dumbledore's voice cut through. He arrived with several teachers, moving with that calm authority that cleared a path. In a blink, he was past Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and had unhooked Madame Norris from the torch bracket. "Come with me, Argus," Dumbledore said to Filch. "And you, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger." Lockhart lurched forward eagerly. "My office is closest, Headmaster. Just upstairs. You can." "Thank you, Gilderoy," Dumbledore replied. The crowd fell back to let them pass. Lockhart smiled and hurried after Dumbledore. McGonagall and Snape followed as well. Left in the hall, hundreds of Gryffindors and Ravenclaws exchanged uncertain looks. "That's brilliant. Why didn't we think of getting rid of that cat?" Fred muttered. "Probably because we have a secret weapon," George answered. "What secret weapon?" Lee Jordan leaned in. "Dung bombs, of course," the twins chorused. "That stuff can foul Madame Norris's sense of smell." Lee nodded, as if that explained everything, then added, "I wonder what'll happen to Harry and Ron. Surely they shouldn't have stuck around at a crime scene." "Do you think Ron's your brother, Ginny?" Colin asked, turning to her in the crowd. "I don't think Harry could be the culprit. He'd never do something like this. It'd be awful if Harry Potter got expelled. I wrote to my brother. He wants to meet Harry Potter." Ginny, distracted and worrying about Ron, Harry, and Hermione, tried to follow the conversation. "Do you think the Chamber of Secrets is real? I've never heard of it. The bloodstain doesn't look dry, so the cat must have just died. You lot arrived late. Did you see anything? Any trace of the culprit?" "What?" Ginny's eyes went wide at Colin's remark about arriving late. She wanted to press him for more, but Percy and the Ravenclaw prefects were already trying to restore order. Ginny swallowed her questions. "All right, everyone, stop talking. Line up," Percy barked. "And you, go back to Slytherin, or I'll take points." Malfoy was hustled away, and feet scuffed as the students moved on, but Percy's commands couldn't smother the gossip. "All right, Percy, let them be," Penelope Clearwater murmured. Back in the common room, voices rose everywhere as rumors of the chamber spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Mr. Riddle knew many secret places. Was Slytherin's chamber one of them? Ginny didn't yet suspect that Cyrus was behind the diary's powers. She only wanted to know if the diary's owner had seen anything while controlling her, anything that might point to the real culprit, or, even better, to the location of Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. She slipped into her dormitory, opened the diary on her bed, and drew the curtains around herself. "Mr. Riddle," she wrote, hands trembling, "do you know about Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets?" "Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets," the diary answered. "Why are you asking about this now?" Ginny described the events after the feast slowly, in careful handwriting. "Did you find any clues? Do you know anything about the chamber?" "Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets." The question hung in the diary's cramped, neat script. Cyrus, who now inhabited the diary, paused. Tell the truth, or conceal it? He wasn't sure whether Tom Riddle in the original story had shown Ginny everything. To speak plainly carried risks. And yet, after meeting Harry, Riddle had been so eager to show his memories. To speak, or not to speak? That was the question. 18 Dumbledore, the Chamber of Secrets. Yes, there is such a thing. After a moment's thought, Cyrus decided it wasn't the right moment to say more. The Chamber of Secrets incident hadn't yet become public, and the only casualty so far had been a cat. If he showed Ginny that memory now, and she went confronting Hagrid, it would be far too easy to expose himself. But silence required finesse. The best approach was to tell just enough. "Really, Mr. Riddle, you know where the Chamber of Secrets is?" Ginny asked, thrilled. "Not exactly," Cyrus said. "Something similar happened here 50 years ago. You're probably wondering why I received a Special Service to the School award, yet the medal doesn't say why, does it?" Ginny nodded, then remembered Mr. Riddle couldn't see her, so she forced herself to write in the diary. I exposed the person who opened the chamber then, Cyrus continued. Back then, a poor student had already been killed by the monster. I found the clue and decided I couldn't cover for him, so I told the headmaster. Because a student had died, the headmaster insisted I keep the matter confidential. The monster in the chamber was driven out, and as for the one who opened it, 50 years have passed. He may already be dead, who knows? Cyrus spoke half-truths. The last sentence sounded like a lie, but was, in fact, true enough. As for whether the chamber has been opened again, I don't think so. Reopening the chamber and letting a terrifying monster loose just to get at a cat. I admit that cat is annoying, but it doesn't deserve that. Maybe it was a prank. Tonight, I used your body to wander the castle and thought I saw a figure, but I didn't get a clear look. Is that so? Ginny's heart eased when she heard the person who had opened the chamber might be dead. She didn't press further about the identity. She trusted Cyrus completely now, and the chamber fascinated her. Mr. Riddle, can you show me where that chamber was 50 years ago? Of course. Cyrus marked from memory the hidden room where Hagrid had once kept Aragog. To be honest, keeping an acromantula in the castle was almost as dangerous as keeping a basilisk. The two were comparable threats. If Tom hadn't already killed someone and forced Aragog away, it would only have been a matter of time before Hagrid got into trouble. Ginny already had a plan. That night, around midnight, she slipped from the common room. The fat lady's portrait was asleep. The corridor was empty. As she passed a classroom on the 5th floor, she heard familiar voices from inside. Ginny crouched in the window alcove and listened. You think I should tell them about the voice I heard? Harry's voice. Don't, Ron said without hesitation. Hearing things others can't is not a good sign, even in the wizarding world. He sounded worried that if Harry said anything, Harry might be blamed. Harry's tone betrayed some hurt. You believe me, don't you? Of course I do, Ron said quickly, but you have to admit it's very strange. I know it's strange, Harry said. The whole thing's strange. What about those words on the wall? The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. What does that even mean? Oh, that reminds me of something, Ron said slowly. Someone told me about the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts. Bill, I think. What's a squib? Harry asked. Ginny heard the odd question and almost laughed. Nearly every young witch or wizard fretted about whether they or someone they loved might be a squib. Ron explained, a little embarrassed but earnest. A squib is someone born into a wizarding family with no magical ability, he said. They're rare, the opposite of a muggle-born witch or wizard. If Filch is doing a quick-spell course, he must be a squib. It explains a lot. His hatred of the students is probably jealousy. Ginny let out a quiet breath of relief. They wouldn't be expelled for being a squib. She heard Harry say, Let's just go to bed. We don't want Snape finding us and making trouble. Ginny waited until the trio left, then slipped from her hiding place and hurried down the corridor to the spot Cyrus had marked. The secret room was indeed hidden and empty. As Mr. Riddle had said, whatever had lived inside had already been driven out. Only thick dust and old cobwebs remained. Ginny felt both relieved and a little disappointed. If it wasn't the chamber's monster, then catching the prankster was the priority. One name sprang to mind, Draco Malfoy. Ever since the summer, Ginny had suspected him. Tonight, he'd been acting oddly as well. She intended to return to the dormitory and tell Mr. Riddle her suspicions, but when she turned, she saw someone she hadn't expected. Professor Dumbledore? Ginny almost froze. Good evening, Miss Weasley. Dumbledore stood in the shadow of the staircase. His tall figure seemed even taller in the dim light. His blue eyes shone like gemstones. Professor, what are you doing here? Ginny's voice trembled. Being caught out of bed by the headmaster was not a laughing matter. Dumbledore seemed to misunderstand her nervousness. He looked straight at her, as if peering into her soul, but his expression was mild. That is a question I ought to ask you, Miss Weasley, he said. With such a terrifying attack and so late at night, I would expect you to be in the Gryffindor dormitory rather than wandering the castle. Ginny dropped her eyes. This couldn't be good. Dumbledore continued, kindly but firmly, Of course I won't punish you. I'm here because someone appears intent on sowing panic, claiming the Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Coincidentally, 50 years ago, a student reported another student and a monster was driven from the school. Indeed, it was very dangerous. At the mention of Riddle's actions, Ginny's fingers itched to share what Cyrus had told her. But this was her secret with Mr. Riddle. She swallowed the words. Dumbledore, reading her hesitation, guessed she was keeping something back. "All right," he said, "go back to bed." "Yes, sir." Ginny nodded and began up the stairs. Halfway up, Dumbledore called softly, "Wait." She turned. "Yes?" "Before you go, Miss Weasley, are you sure there is nothing more you wish to tell me?" His blue eyes were unexpectedly sharp. 100 thoughts flashed through Ginny's mind. After a moment, she said in a small voice, "No, sir." Dumbledore inclined his head as if satisfied and smiled gently. "Then good night, Miss Weasley. On evenings like this, it's best not to wander about the castle." "Good night, sir," Ginny whispered and hurried to her dormitory, the secret she carried heavier than before. 19. Dumbledore led astray by Ginny. "So you met Dumbledore?" In the memory space, Cyrus's face tightened. He had only learned about it the night before. Ginny had fallen asleep as soon as she returned to her dormitory, but she had told him everything before dozing off. "Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore mentioned you, and even though he didn't say your name, I knew it was you," she had said excitedly. Then Cyrus's mood had plunged. "I might have been exposed," he breathed, forcing himself to stay calm. After waiting so long, he hadn't expected things to come to a head so quickly. He and Riddle were not the same person. Their feelings about Ginny were different. A small coincidence, a slight difference in attitude, could change everything. Still, there might be hope. If Dumbledore believed he still had control of the situation, he wouldn't act rashly. Just as Quirrell had been a useful practice for his master last year, there might still be room to maneuver. Cyrus steadied himself. He couldn't know Dumbledore's intentions for certain, but nearly 20 hours had passed since Ginny's meeting, and the diary was still safe in her possession. Things hadn't reached a final dead end. "Exposed? But I never told anyone about Mr. Riddle," Ginny had cried, nearly dropping her pen. "It's not your fault," Cyrus soothed. "Magic is unpredictable. Dumbledore is a master of legilimency. When he looks into your eyes, he can get a good sense of your thoughts." He spoke with the calm, clinical tone of someone used to covering panic. Wizards like to say legilimency isn't mind-reading, but to an unguarded mind, it's often worse. "What should I do?" Ginny had been on the verge of tears. She didn't want Mr. Riddle to die because of her, nor did she want to lose the only confidant she'd found. "Don't worry. If anyone asks you to hand me over, hide me. I'll modify your memories and bury myself with the real ones so no one can find me." It was a last resort. If it came to that, Cyrus didn't know when the diary would next be opened, and if the diary remained intact, would Lord Voldemort live or die? The thought weighed on both of them. Meanwhile, in his office, Albus Dumbledore replayed the meeting with Ginny Weasley again and again in the Pensieve. He had used legilimency on a first year, perhaps an unseemly thing to admit, but he had been too eager to understand why she had appeared in that place by such an unlikely coincidence. The images surprised him. He watched himself, unusually intrusive, using powerful magic to push into the girl's mind, guiding her thoughts with a casual question. "Before you go, Miss Weasley, is there anything else you wish to tell me?" Ginny had been hiding something. In the stream of her recollection, one thought had echoed with a clarity that made Dumbledore sit bolt upright. Draco Malfoy is the heir of Slytherin. Draco Malfoy? The suggestion struck Dumbledore as preposterous. If Salazar Slytherin had truly chosen Draco as his heir, then Slytherin's judgment had been peculiar indeed. It was not that Dumbledore looked down on the boy. He saw talent in Draco. But the Malfoys, for all their pride and ambition, were not the sort that sprang to mind when one thought of the heir of Slytherin. More importantly, Draco did not have Parseltongue, or so it seemed to Dumbledore. If a Chamber of Secrets existed, Parseltongue would likely be a key to opening it. Of course, Dumbledore could not even be certain such a chamber existed. Dumbledore had long suspected that Hagrid had been innocent of the murder 50 years ago. He had not initially suspected Tom Riddle, but as time passed, many pieces fit together. The likely culprit of those events, he believed, was Tom Riddle. What remained unclear was the method. Had it been a deliberate killing to create a Horcrux, or as the rumors held, had someone opened a Chamber of Secrets to purge those deemed unworthy of magic? Draco Malfoy isn't impossible, Dumbledore murmured to himself. Arthur Weasley had gone through the Malfoy house that summer. Perhaps Lucius Malfoy had smuggled items from Voldemort's era into Hogwarts. His speculation was not far off the truth, though Ginny's stray thought had steered him toward the wrong conclusion. The fact that Draco, who should have been returning to the dungeons with his Slytherin group, had been seen on the third floor at the same time was more odd than Harry and his friend's presence. As for Ginny being where Hagrid kept the acromantula, perhaps someone had told her the location of a chamber of secrets that was not truly the chamber. 50 years ago, the chain of custody of some item might have passed through a grandparent's hands. If there was any artifact from Voldemort's time that could open such a place, Dumbledore thought it might finally explain much that had remained obscure. He emerged from the Pensieve and addressed Fawkes, who was on the verge of rebirth. "Hurry and prepare yourself, old friend. I may need your help." Fawkes lowered his head and regurgitated a tail feather, ignoring Dumbledore's words as phoenixes do. "It seems I should find time to visit an old acquaintance, Horace Slughorn. I haven't seen him since he retired," Dumbledore added to himself, pacing to the window and watching the moonlight stream across the grounds. "But let us wait a little longer. If it truly is Draco, I expect Lucius Malfoy will make a move." He sighed, the weariness of decades of puzzling over dark matters showing in the soft exhale. Work, he thought, was never done. Ever since Cyrus had hinted that Dumbledore might have discovered their secret, Ginny had been on edge. She tried to hide it, but Percy or Ron might have misread her unease for fear that Harry and Ron would be expelled. Ron, for his part, assumed she was worried about Madame Norris. "You don't really know Madame Norris," he told her. "Honestly, we're better off without her. Things like this don't happen often at Hogwarts. They'll catch that lunatic and throw him out of here. I just hope they manage to petrify Filch before he expels anyone." At the mention of the culprit, Ginny's face had gone pale, and she had fled, head bowed. "I was only joking," Ron stammered after her. But the professors failed to catch the attacker, and Madame Norris remained petrified, and the idea of a prank began to fall apart. Rumors spread. Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets had been opened. The attacker, people whispered, was Harry Potter. Ginny told Cyrus what she was hearing. "Hogwarts students jump to conclusions," he said, trying to soothe her. "Even if the chamber was opened, I don't believe it would have been Harry." "I'm not worried about Harry," Ginny said. "I'm more worried about you." Since Halloween, there had been no further attacks. Older students had mostly stopped talking about it, though the younger ones still gossiped. Ginny's worst fears had eased a little. Dumbledore seemed not to be acting, and for a while she had meant to investigate Malfoy, but she didn't get around to it. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had become obsessed, wandering the castle together and plotting in a way that made Ginny uneasy. She kept hearing words like potion, Lockhart, and 1 month. Cyrus, however, knew exactly what they were up to. Hermione had tricked a signature out of the gullible Lockhart and pilfered a book from the restricted section, Potent Potions, or something like it, with the intent to brew the Polyjuice potion. They had taken up residence in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom to carry it out, which made things awkward for Cyrus. Fortunately, Cyrus rarely needed to visit the Chamber of Secrets himself. He spent most of his time in the Room of Requirement practicing spells or finding other ways to vent, sometimes even going after the roosters Hagrid kept. Dumbledore's presence made Cyrus feel pressed for time. He did not want to waste a single second. He needed more power if he was ever to face Dumbledore and survive. The basilisk was a help, but not enough. Even absorbing all of Tom Riddle's student memories wouldn't guarantee escape from Dumbledore. He needed something greater. That something, he decided, might be in the restricted section. Hogwarts' library had been accumulating books for 1,000 years. The restricted section held tomes of dangerous or dark magic, books so powerful or corrupting that they were normally off-limits. Some even carried curses that activated when the pages were turned. The answers Cyrus wanted could very well be hidden there. One night, after Ginny had fallen asleep with the diary tucked beneath her pillow, Cyrus slipped his consciousness into her sleeping body. Ginny's eyes snapped open, and she sat bolt upright, like a puppet. Cyrus took control, rose from the four-poster, and left the tower. With Madame Norris petrified, the castle was quieter than usual. Far fewer students dared wander at night. Fred and George were bold, but without the cat, they made less use of the Marauder's map. Filch, bereft of his familiar, was as helpless as someone who had lost his eyes. It was the perfect cover. No one could guess where Cyrus was going. Even so, the restricted section was not something a first year could wander into with a simple Alohomora. If it were that easy, Gryffindors would have looted it long ago. Cyrus carried Ginny's U-wand and reached the library's fourth-floor entrance. He whispered Alohomora and eased the door open, slipped inside, and made his way between the stacks to the spiral staircase in the corner. A rope bearing the upper level looked plain enough, just a piece of cord stretched across the stairwell, but it was a magical barrier in miniature. One careless move, and an alarm would scream. He set the wand to work, reading and deciphering the enchantments wound into the rope. 10 minutes later, the knot in the center untied itself, and the once taut cord sagged to the side as if it had been handled all night. Cyrus smiled to himself. "Easier than I thought," he muttered. After so many years, Hogwarts' restricted protections hadn't changed much, and with Riddle's memories as his guide, Cyrus already knew his way around. Upstairs, the shelves held a roll call of forbidden knowledge. The Book of 112, the Dark Arts of Alchemy, Hermetic Texts, Natural Magic. Then a title made him pause. The Jewish Book of Abraham. Cyrus remembered it from the stories of Nicholas Flamel, an obscure, dream-given book that supposedly had pointed Flamel toward the Philosopher's Stone. He pulled the volume free and flipped through it, astonishment rising. This wasn't a copy. He had found an original. "Darlings, it's the beginning of the month. Please give me some votes," pitifully.